July 23, 1945, 1:47 hours, northern coastline. Engineer throttled his locomotive to 45 miles per hour through the coastal sector. 16 freight cars behind him, troops and ammunition for garrison, headlight off, running dark to avoid American submarines offshore. The tracks ran straight here, 400 yards from the water, safe distance. Every submarine commander knew the calculation. Torpedoes required 12 feet of water minimum. The coastal shelf here dropped to 12 feet at 200 yards offshore. No submarine could operate closer. No submarine could reach the railroad. Had made this run 47 times. 6 trains per day every day for 3 weeks. Not one incident, not one attack. The coastal railroad was untouchable. Then the section of track directly ahead of locomotive exploded. 55 pounds of high explosive detonated beneath his boiler. The locomotive disintegrated. Boiler ruptured. Superheated steam mixed with burning fuel. Metal fragments shot 200 feet vertical. Drive wheels separated from chassis. Smokestacks cartwheeled down the embankment. 16 freight cars slammed into wreckage at full speed. First car accordioned. Second car climbed over the first, wooden frame splintering. Third car jackknifed sideways, rolled off embankment. Cars 4 through 16 piled into growing mass of twisted metal. Fires ignited. Ammunition began cooking off. Secondary explosions rippled through the wreckage. 650 yards offshore, USS Barb's crew watched the fireball. A submarine had just destroyed a train. Nobody could explain how. Naval doctrine said submarines attacked ships. Submarines used torpedoes. Torpedoes traveled underwater. Torpedoes could not reach a railroad 400 yards inland. Even if a torpedo could somehow be fired at the shore, the coastal shelf was too shallow. Torpedo would beach itself at 180 yards, still 220 yards short of the tracks. Submarines carried deck guns, the 4-inch gun on Barb's forward deck. But a 4-inch shell could not destroy 16 freight cars, could not trigger that massive secondary explosion. The ammunition cooking off suggested something had detonated the train's cargo directly. But how? Japanese Coastal Command reviewed the wreckage at dawn. The locomotive's boiler had exploded from below, not from shell impact, not from torpedo fragment, from directly beneath the tracks. Track inspection revealed disturbed gravel at the blast site. Something had been buried there. The railroad ran 400 yards from the water. American submarines had been spotted in the area, USS Barb specifically. The most aggressive submarine in the Pacific Fleet. But how could a submarine reach a railroad? How could submariners plant explosives 400 yards inland without being detected? Japanese garrison commander sent urgent message to Tokyo. Train destroyed by unknown method. Suspect American sabotage. No surface vessels observed. Submarine USS Barb operating offshore. Recommend immediate coastal patrols. Tokyo's response was skeptical. Submarines do not conduct ground operations. Submarine crews are sailors, not infantry. American doctrine prohibited submarines from surface missions against land targets. Too risky, too exposed. A submarine on the surface near shore was vulnerable to artillery, vulnerable to patrol boats. One shell could cripple a submarine. Force it to surface, capture the crew. No American commander would risk an entire submarine and 80 men to destroy one train. The tactical mathematics made no sense. One train, value perhaps 60 soldiers and some ammunition. One submarine, value 2,400 tons, 80 trained crew, 4 years of war experience. No rational commander makes that trade. But the train was destroyed. And USS Barb was the only American vessel in the area. Japanese intelligence began analyzing previous Barb attacks. Pattern emerged. June 22nd, factory town destroyed by rocket fire. Rockets came from offshore. Barb surfaced 3 miles out, fired 12 rockets in 5 seconds, submerged before response. June 25th, leather factory burning. June 28th, paper mill destroyed. July 6th, shipyard reduced to wreckage. Every attack followed the same pattern. Barb surfaced at night, fired rockets or shelled targets with deck gun. Disappeared before Japanese forces could respond. But those were offshore bombardments, naval weapons against coastal targets. Submarines had done this before. American submarines routinely shelled Japanese installations throughout 1945. Standard submarine doctrine: surface at night, fire, dive, escape. The train attack was different. Explosives buried beneath the tracks, 400 yards inland. That required human presence on Japanese soil. Required someone to walk from the beach to the railroad, someone to dig, someone to bury 55 pounds of explosive, someone to arm the device, someone to return to the submarine without being detected. Japanese Coastal Command calculated the timeline. The explosion occurred at 1:47. The device must have been planted during darkness. Sunset at 2100 previous evening, sunrise at 4:30, 7-hour window. But Japanese patrols covered that coastline. Two-man teams walked the beach every 2 hours. Guard posts positioned every mile. Searchlights swept the water at irregular intervals. How could American sailors cross all of that without detection? Sailors were not trained for ground infiltration. Sailors were not infantry. Sailors did not know how to move silently through terrain. American naval intelligence heard about the train attack through intercepted Japanese communications. The reports described explosives buried beneath railroad tracks, a submarine crew conducting ground operations. Intelligence analysts in Pearl Harbor found this difficult to believe. They requested confirmation from Pacific Submarine Command. Commander confirmed the attack. USS Barb had destroyed a Japanese train. Details were classified. The analysts began developing theories. Theory 1 emerged from the weapons development section: modified torpedo delivery. The concept seemed plausible. Barb carried Mark 14 torpedoes. Each torpedo, 20 feet long, 3,000 pounds, 600 pounds of explosive. What if a torpedo was modified? Remove the propulsion system, remove the guidance mechanism, keep only the warhead, reduce weight from 3,000 pounds to perhaps 700, still heavy but manageable. The modified warhead could be fitted with a timer instead of contact detonator. Launch the modified torpedo toward shore at low speed. It beaches itself in shallow water. Timer activates after beaching. Waves and tide gradually push the device closer to shore over several hours. Eventually it reaches the beach, continues moving inland through wave action, reaches the railroad embankment. Timer detonates at calculated moment when train passes. The theory had mathematical appeal. Tides along coast, 6 to 8 feet. High tide could theoretically push an object 300 to 400 yards inland. Storm surge could push even farther. The timing would be difficult but possible. Launch modified torpedo at high tide -4 hours. Torpedo beaches. Tide rises over next 4 hours. Wave action pushes device inland. Train schedule was predictable. 6 trains per day, consistent timing. Calculate detonation for moment train passes overhead. Technical feasibility seemed reasonable until someone calculated the actual physics. Problem 1. Wave action is chaotic, not directional. A 700-pound object on a beach does not move in a straight line toward a specific target. It tumbles randomly. It gets caught in debris. It moves laterally as much as inland. The probability of a beach torpedo reaching a specific point 400 yards inland, effectively 0. Problem 2. The railroad embankment was 6 feet above surrounding terrain. Wave action cannot push a 700-pound object uphill. The device would need to climb that embankment. Physically impossible through wave action alone. Problem 3. The explosion occurred directly beneath the locomotive. Precision placement. The disturbed gravel found by Japanese inspectors indicated the device was buried at a specific point on the tracks, not randomly positioned, not moved by waves, deliberately placed. Problem 4. The trigger mechanism. The device detonated when the locomotive passed overhead. That required a pressure-sensitive trigger, or a magnetic trigger, or a tilt trigger activated by rail depression. None of those mechanisms would survive hours of wave action and tumbling through surf and beach debris. The sensors would be destroyed. The circuit would be broken. The device would fail to detonate. Analysis conclusion: modified torpedo theory was mechanically impossible. The weapon could not reach the target, could not be precisely positioned, could not retain functional trigger mechanism. Theory 1 was abandoned, but it had consumed 3 days of analysis. 3 days during which the actual method remained unknown. Theory 2 came from aviation ordnance specialists. They noted that Barb carried rocket launchers. The Mark 51 launcher, 12 rockets, 5-inch spin stabilized, 10 pounds of high explosive per rocket. Standard use: anti-aircraft defense shore bombardment. But rockets could theoretically deliver other payloads. What if Barb had fired a rocket carrying a larger explosive package toward the railroad? Rocket trajectory could reach 3 miles. Railroad was only 400 yards from water, well within range. The rocket could carry 50 to 60 pounds of explosive instead of standard 10-pound warhead. Impact trigger or timer: rocket lands near tracks, buries itself on impact, detonates when train passes. This theory seemed more promising than Theory 1. Rockets were proven technology. Barb definitely had rocket capability. The range was adequate. But the specialists began calculating accuracy. The Mark 51 rocket was designed for area bombardment, not precision strikes. Accuracy at 3 miles, plus or minus 200 yards. Accuracy at 400 yards, plus or minus 30 yards. The railroad tracks were a linear target. 2 rails, 4 feet 8.5 inches apart. To destroy a locomotive, the explosive had to detonate within 10 feet of the rails, preferably directly beneath. A rocket landing 30 yards away would damage the train, might derail it, but would not create the catastrophic explosion that Japanese reports described. Would not vaporize the locomotive, would not trigger secondary explosions in 16 freight cars, would not throw debris 200 feet into the air. The math did not work. Even if Barb fired multiple rockets at the railroad, the probability of one landing precisely on the tracks, less than 5%. The probability of it landing at the exact moment a train was passing, effectively 0. And there was another problem. The Japanese inspection found disturbed gravel at the blast site. The device had been buried. Rockets do not bury themselves. A rocket impact creates a crater, scattered dirt, obvious disturbance. Track inspectors would have found it immediately. But the device that destroyed the train had been carefully concealed, covered with gravel to match surrounding ballast, invisible to casual inspection. That indicated human placement, human concealment, not rocket delivery. Theory 2 failed the same fundamental test as Theory 1. It could not explain the precision, could not explain the concealment, could not explain the trigger timing. American intelligence was running out of conventional explanations. Torpedoes, impossible; rockets, improbable; deck gun bombardment, already ruled out; insufficient destructive power. The attack had definitely occurred. Japanese reports were consistent and detailed. The method remained unexplained. By August 2nd, 9 days after the attack, American intelligence admitted they had no working theory. The file was marked: Barb train attack, method unknown, investigation continuing. Meanwhile, USS Barb was approaching Midway. Barb arrived on August 4th, 1945. Standard post-patrol procedure: mission debriefing, crew rest, submarine maintenance. Commander submitted his patrol report. The report was 47 pages. It described rocket attacks on shore installations, described deck gun bombardments, described torpedo attacks on merchant vessels. On page 32, a single paragraph addressed the train attack. The paragraph was marked classification, top secret. 3 sentences. On night of 22-23 July, shore party of 8 volunteers departed Barb via rubber raft. Party proceeded inland 400 yards and emplaced demolition charge beneath coastal railroad tracks. Charge detonated successfully at 1:47, 23 July, destroying northbound locomotive and 16 freight cars. Shore party. 2 words that changed submarine warfare doctrine. The concept seemed impossible. Submarine crews do not leave their vessel, do not conduct ground operations. do not operate as infantry. But's report was classified top secret for reasons beyond the tactical innovation. The strategic implications were profound. If one submarine could conduct ground operations, all submarines could. If Barb could destroy a railroad, other submarines could destroy bridges, power stations, communication facilities, coastal defenses. The Japanese coastline, 18,500 miles, impossible to defend every mile, impossible to guard every beach, impossible to protect every coastal target. If American submarines began regular shore raids, Japan would need to redeploy thousands of troops from frontline positions to coastal defense, troops that were desperately needed elsewhere, resources that could not be spared. Pacific Fleet Command requested detailed briefing from. The briefing occurred on August 6th. The same day atomic bomb destroyed Hiroshima. This briefing was attended by 14 officers, submarine commanders, intelligence analysts, weapons specialists. He began with the tactical problem. Late June 1945, USS Barb operating off coast. Merchant shipping nearly eliminated in that sector. No naval targets remaining, but Japanese supply trains running constantly. 6 per day, carrying troops and ammunition south. Those trains represented legitimate military targets, but submarines had no way to attack them. Doctrine said, submarines attack ships. Rejected that limitation. He observed the coastal railroad through periscope for 3 days, noted train schedules, noted guard positions, noted patrol patterns, noted beach approaches. Calculated the railroad could be reached. The challenge was execution. Required landing party, required explosives, required specialized equipment, none of which submarines normally carried. Began with equipment. Barb's crew included Saunders, gunner's mate. Saunders had worked construction before the war, understood explosives, understood demolition. Asked Saunders, could a pressure-detonated mine be constructed from materials available on the submarine? Saunders said yes. The submarine carried 55-pound scuttling charges, demolition explosives intended to destroy the submarine if forced to surface and faced capture. Each charge, high explosive with waterproof casing. The submarine also carried electrical components, wire, batteries, switches, and the torpedo workshop had micro-switch pressure sensors. Saunders designed the device over 2 days. Base, 55-pound scuttling charge. Trigger, micro-switch mounted beneath a pressure plate. The pressure plate would be positioned beneath the railroad rail. When locomotive passed overhead, rail would depress slightly. Depression would close the micro-switch. Switch would complete electrical circuit. Circuit would detonate explosive. Simple mechanism, reliable. The device required no timer, no remote control, no complex electronics, just train passes, rail depresses, bomb explodes. But the device still needed to reach the railroad. That required human carriers. Called for volunteers. He explained the mission clearly. 8 men would take rubber rafts from submarine to shore, would cross 400 yards of Japanese-held territory, would emplace explosive beneath railroad tracks, would return to submarine before dawn. If captured, they would be executed as saboteurs. International law was unclear about submarine crews conducting ground operations. They might not receive prisoner-of-war protections. Every man aboard Barb volunteered, all 80 crew members. Selected 8 based on youth, physical fitness, ability to move silently, steady nerves. Saunders' demolition expertise. Billy, electrician, would arm the device. 6 others, machinists, average age 23 years old. None had infantry training. None had conducted ground operations. They were submarine crew, but they had volunteered. Training began immediately. Barb's deck became practice ground. The men practiced moving silently, practiced low crawling, practiced hand signals, practiced raft handling, practiced equipment assembly in darkness. They had 4 days to prepare, 4 days to transform from submarine crew to shore raiders. July 22nd, Barb positioned herself off the coast, 1,200 yards from shore. At 23:45 hours, the shore party assembled on Barb's deck, 2 rubber rafts, 4 men per raft. Each man, dark clothing, grease-blackened face, soft-soled shoes. Equipment, 55-pound explosive, pressure switch assembly, wire, batteries, shovels, weapons. The rafts pushed off at 5 on July 23rd, 8 men paddling toward Japanese territory, 650 yards to the beach. Barb waited, engines ready for emergency dive. At 20, the rafts reached the beach. The men dragged rafts above the waterline, covered them with seaweed. They formed single file, Saunders leading. They moved slowly, stopping every 20 yards to listen. They crossed the beach in 4 minutes, reached the coastal road, paused. The road surface was packed dirt. Saunders looked both directions. No headlights, no movement. He crossed. The others followed one at a time. Beyond the road, drainage ditch. They descended into it, followed it north for 50 yards, then climbed out on the inland side. Now in grassland, grass was waist-high. They continued in single file, staying low. After 12 minutes, they could see the railroad embankment ahead. Saunders stopped the column, sent one man forward to scout. The scout crawled the final 50 yards, reached the tracks, looked both directions. Nothing, no guards. The railroad was undefended at this point. He signaled all clear. The team moved up. All 8 men assembled at the tracks. 48 hours. They had been ashore 43 minutes. Unpacked the explosive device. Saunders and another man began digging, small folding shovels. Railroad ballast was loose gravel, easy to excavate. They dug for 8 minutes. Hole 2 feet deep, 3 feet long. Placed the explosive at the bottom. Positioned the pressure plate directly beneath where the rail would sit. The micro switch sat on top of the pressure plate. When rail depressed under locomotive weight, plate would push down. Switch would close. Electrical circuit would complete. Detonation. Connected the wiring. Tested circuit. Positioned the battery pack. Made final connection. Circuit was now live. Any significant downward pressure on the rail would trigger explosion. He covered the device carefully. Gravel first, then smaller stones, then dirt, smoothing it to match surrounding ballast. No visible disturbance. 108 hours. They had been at the railroad for 20 minutes. Time to withdraw. The team moved back down the embankment, same route in reverse. They moved faster now. Mission complete. At 1:32 they reached the beach, found the rafts, dragged them to the waterline. All 8 men climbed aboard, began paddling toward Barb. They were halfway to the submarine, when's voice cut through the darkness. He was shouting through a megaphone, "Paddle faster, another train was coming." The men could hear it now. Distant sound of locomotive building speed. Had spotted the train through the periscope. Headlight was off, but locomotive exhaust plume was visible against mountain silhouette. The timing was catastrophically close. The rafts closed the distance. The sound of train grew louder. The rafts reached Barb at 1:46. Men scrambled up Submarine's hull, through deck hatches. Rubber boats cut loose. No time to retrieve them. Ordered deck crew below, sealed hatches. Barb's diesel engines rumbled. Submarine turned away from shore, accelerating toward deeper water. At 1:47, on July 23, 1945, the northbound train reached the section where the microswitch waited. Locomotive's lead wheels passed over device. 68 tons of steel pressing down. Western rail depressed. Microswitch closed. Circuit completed. 55 pounds of high explosive detonated beneath the boiler. The explosion was visible from Barb even though Submarine was now 700 yards offshore. Massive fireball erupted. Locomotive's boiler ruptured instantly. Metal fragments shot upward. The locomotive disintegrated. 16 freight cars slammed into wreckage at full speed. Sound reached Barb as rolling thunder. Fires ignited. Ammunition began cooking off. Secondary explosions rippled through chaos. First submarine crew in history to destroy a land target through ground operation. Not through torpedoes, not through deck gun. Through direct action on enemy soil. The mission revealed significant risks. 8 men exposed for 83 minutes on enemy territory. Any one of a dozen things could have gone wrong. The margin for error had been razor thin. Barb's train attack remained the only submarine ground operation of the Pacific War, but the concept did not die. Post-war analysis became classified case study. used in submarine warfare curriculum, used in special operations planning. In 1962, President Kennedy established the Navy SEALs, sea, air, and land teams. The SEAL mission profile included shore raids from submarines, infiltration of hostile territory, demolition of key targets. The same tactical concept, and his crew had pioneered 17 years earlier. The 8 volunteers who went ashore that night received Navy Commendation Medals. Their names remained classified along with mission details for 30 years. Saunders and 6 others, submarine crew who became infantry for 83 minutes, who crossed 400 yards of enemy territory, who buried 55 pounds of explosive, who returned safely, who changed naval doctrine. The Japanese never discovered how the attack was executed. Their intelligence reports concluded, method unknown, possibly special forces insertion, source of landing unknown. They never connected the explosion to USS Barb, never identified the shore party, never understood that submarine crew had walked onto Japanese soil, had completed military objective, had vanished. That is how USS Barb destroyed a train. That is how submarine crew became raiders. That is how doctrine changed.